Have you ever walked into a place and felt like something just wasn't quite right? Like the very air was thick with unseen energy, maybe even a whisper of what once was?
Oh, absolutely. It's like stepping into a memory, but not your own. More like you're tuning into something older.
Exactly. And that's exactly the kind of unsettling feeling we're going to unpack today as we take a deep dive into the legend of Borley Church.
Borley Church. The name alone sends chills down your spine. Known by many as England's most haunted location. But the question isn't if it's haunted, but why.
And that's where this deep dive gets really interesting because we're examining the accounts of Ed and Lorraine Warren.
Now, even if you aren't deep into paranormal investigation, you probably recognize their names. They're practically legends in their own right.
Totally. We're talking about the folks who inspired the Conjuring movies. But before we get to their bone-chilling experience at Borley, let's rewind back to the 14th century.
Setting the stage with a little historical context. I like it.
Right. It all starts with a forbidden romance.
Classic recipe for a haunting. Right there. Forbidden love.
Well, this one's a real heartbreaker. The story goes that a monk and a nun from the monastery fell head over heels for each other. But, of course, their love was considered a huge no-no.
An understatement if ever I heard one. We're talking sacrilege of the highest order.
And the punishments were brutal. The monk was hanged, but the nun...
Legend has it she was sealed alive within the church walls. Talk about a tragic end.
Ugh, that's just awful. To be entombed while still alive, that's the stuff nightmares are made of.
It's the kind of gruesome tale that embeds itself in a location's history.
And that's just the beginning. Fast forward to the 1800s, and we have a new rectory built near the ruins of the old church. Enter Reverend Henry Bull and his family.
Oh boy, if those walls could talk right.
More like Scream. Things went from eerie to downright terrifying for the Bull family. Think phantom footsteps, disembodied voices, and even apparitions.
And we can't forget the most infamous resident of all, the Phantom Nun.
Oh yeah, I read about her. Apparently, she was often seen gliding through the halls. But here's the thing that always gets me. She's described as being legless.
A chilling detail, for sure, and a consistent one. Nearly every account of the Phantom Nun mentions this, which makes you wonder, what really happened to that poor nun back in the 14th century?
Okay, that's where I'd be drawing the line. No amount of curiosity is worth running into a legless phantom nun. But the stories don't stop with the Bull family, do they? This nun, she becomes a recurring character in Borley's saga.
It's like she's woven into the fabric of the place, almost as if she is Borley. And her story, tragic and brutal, it echoes through time.
It makes you wonder if she's a restless spirit, forever trapped, or, and I hate to even say it, something else entirely.
Now, these were the 1800s, a time when stories spread by word of mouth, often embellished with each telling. So how do we know what's true?
Exactly. Did anyone even try to verify these stories, separate fact from fiction?
Absolutely. In the early 1900s, a renowned paranormal investigator named Harry Price decided to tackle the Borley case head-on. He was determined to document the unexplained happenings.
He was like the original Ghostbuster. I bet he had some wild stories.
Well, Price was known for his meticulous approach. Instead of just sensationalizing the stories, he used a variety of techniques like seances, automatic writing, even early forms of photography to try to capture evidence.
Talk about a dedicated researcher. So what did he find? Did his investigation confirm or debunk the legends of Borley?
His findings, well, let's just say they were interesting. Price's time at Borley is a whole other rabbit hole we could explore. His work definitely fueled Borley's reputation, attracting even more curiosity seekers and paranormal enthusiasts. But whether he found definitive proof, that's up for debate even today.
So even with some investigation, the mystery of Borley Church continued. So Borley Church is already this hotbed of paranormal activity, decades worth of creepy stories and unexplained phenomena.
Decades. Try centuries. Don't forget, those ruins date back to the 14th century.
Oh, right. So by the time Ed and Lorraine Warren set their sights on Borley, it already had this massive reputation.
And the Warrens? Well, they weren't afraid of a challenge or a creepy old church, for that matter.
That's an understatement. They were already making a name for themselves, tackling some pretty high-profile cases.
Exactly. But they weren't just chasing ghosts for fame. They were a team, each with their own unique approach.
Right. Ed, the demonologist, came at it from a religious angle.
He was all about the holy relics, potential demonic influences, that kind of thing.
And Lorraine, with her clairvoyance, she could actually communicate with the spirits, right?
She claimed to, yes.
Yeah.
And whether you believe in that sort of thing or not, you can't deny the impact it had on their investigations. Lorraine's ability, or at least her conviction that she had it, added a whole other layer to their work.
It definitely made for some compelling stories. So, they arrive at Borley. What happens next? Does Lorraine immediately go into a trance? Do they see the phantom nun right off the bat?
It wasn't quite like the movies. According to their accounts, it was more of a gradual descent into unease.
Oh, so more psychological thriller than a jump scare horror flick.
Exactly. Lorraine was always more sensitive to those unseen energies. She described feeling this oppressive presence, especially within the church ruins.
Okay, I get goosebumps just thinking about it. Did she actually see the nun? The legless phantom everyone kept describing?
Not right away, but she did eventually claim to have encountered the spectral figure of a nun, not within the church itself, but out on the grounds where the old rectory once stood.
Interesting. So even though the rectory was long gone, destroyed in a fire, the energy of those events, of the nun, was still somehow present.
It's like the land itself was holding on to those memories, those tragedies.
It really makes you think about the nature of haunting, Is it tied to a physical place, to the objects within it, or is it something more ethereal?
It's a question that has fascinated and frustrated paranormal investigators for ages. And unfortunately, Borley doesn't offer any easy answers.
True, but it does offer more questions. Like, what about Ed's side of the investigation? Did his research support Lorraine's experiences? Did he find any evidence to corroborate the legend of the nun?
Well, while Lorraine was busy connecting with the spiritual realm, Ed was focused on the tangible world, poring over historical records, talking to locals, really trying to get a sense of the history of the place.
Sounds like classic Ed. So did he find anything interesting?
Actually, yes, and this is where things get really eerie. Ed learns from a local priest that years before their arrival, attempts had been made to spiritually cleanse the site, to put the nun's spirit to rest.
Wait, so they tried to perform an exorcism on the entire church?
Well, not quite an exorcism, but something similar. A ritual, a blessing, call it what you will, intended to clear the negative energy.
Okay, so not your typical smudging ceremony then. And this priest, Ed, talked to him. What did he have to say about all this?
The priest, he wasn't exactly thrilled about the nun's return.
Oh, why not? You'd think he'd be happy they'd gotten rid of the spooky nun ghost.
You would think so, wouldn't you? But this priest, he seemed genuinely afraid. He told Ed that the return of the nun, especially after those attempts to help her move on, was not a good sign at all.
A priest afraid of a ghost. Okay, now that's just gotta be some serious bad juju. What did the Warrens make of that?
Well, Lorraine was already pretty unsettled, what with feeling that oppressive presence and actually seeing the phantom nun.
Right, she was definitely picking up on something.
And I think the priest's fear just amplified everything for her. Here you have this man of faith, someone who's supposed to be a beacon of hope and comfort, and even he is terrified. That's got to make you think twice.
Yeah, that would definitely give me the chills. So what did they do? Did they try to help this priest? Did they try another cleansing ritual?
Here's the thing. The Warrens, they leave Borley, go back home, thinking that's the end of it. But for Lorraine, it wasn't.
Oh no, what happened? Did she see the nun again?
Worse, she claimed to see the nun back in their home, thousands of miles away from Borley.
Get out! Are you serious? So it wasn't just a haunting tied to a specific location.
It seemed like something followed her home, and she was convinced it was the nun. Lorraine truly believed that this entity had attached itself to her during their investigation.
Okay, now that's just creepy. So what did she do? Did she try to communicate with it, figure out what it wanted?
She actually believed she needed an exorcism to break the connection. That's how strong this attachment was, at least in her mind.
An exorcism? Wow, talk about intense. It really makes you think twice about poking around in these haunted places.
It certainly makes you appreciate the potential risks involved, that's for sure. Borley serves as a reminder that while we might be curious about these things, about the other side, there might be consequences we can't even begin to understand.
It's like opening a door you can't close. So what became of Borley Church? Is it still standing?
Sadly, the physical church is no more. It was destroyed in a fire in 1939 under mysterious circumstances, of course. Some even say it was caused by the nun's vengeful spirit. But whether it was arson, an accident, or something more paranormal, Borley Church's physical presence is gone.
Gone, but certainly not forgotten. Every account, every whisper of the paranormal, from the tragic tale of the nun to the Warrens' unsettling experience, they all add to Borley's sinister legacy.
It's a stark reminder that some places hold on to energy, to stories, to tragedies in a way that continues to fascinate and frighten us, even centuries later.
Well, there you have it, folks. Another deep dive into the unexplained. Until next time, keep those lights on, and remember, sometimes the most unsettling stories are the ones we tell ourselves.
Sleep tight.